Hey everyone. Okay, so I'd like to begin by saying I feel very inspired right now. Not because of something I saw on YouTube, but yesterday I think was one of the greatest days I've ever had in my life. And I won't get too much into it, but one part of that day, if you look into my favorites folder, you'll find at least a clue as to something that happened or something I witnessed that was really awesome, that I felt affected me in a way and even changed something about me for the better. I want to make this video talking about a very, very broad subject because I really hate it when people get into specifics because I don't really feel interested in talking about those. Because I'm a guy who still lives with my parents, and I don't really have any control over the specifics, or not. I don't really have any means of making something happen. And when I mean this, I mean politically or philosophically. You can come to all sorts of goddamn conclusions, and for what? It doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't really change anything. You can have a debate that lasts years, and then eventually you and your partner come to agree on one solution, and it doesn't matter, because no one's gonna listen to you anyway, right? But the basics are where it's at. And the basics come into forms of, well, moral arguments. Right and wrong. That's really the good field, because even if you conclude something, it matters to you, and you can change something about yourself. But I digress. Politics. I watched a video by TJ on the subject, and it was a very long and sort of somber, or I don't want to say, very long and well thought video that was really just a sort of a stream of consciousness on a few of his thoughts. I've also seen videos by Anekantavad about, I'm never going to pronounce that guy's name right, but he made video on the subject of, it's the people that believe themselves to be the reasonable, the philosophers, the gurus, who are more often than not the ones who are fanatical and the ones that are kind of crazy. And everything I see in my life fits together. Everything I see is part of some grand scheme of things. Every school of knowledge plays into one another. Economics into politics, politics into law and justice into philosophy, and philosophy even to economics. And really, all of these studies affect each other in one way or another. So, we can sit down and we can talk about how we're sad that the world isn't going the way we want it to. And that's fine. Everyone has a right to say that and express themselves. I can say that I agree with TJ on a lot of the points that he made in his video about how the American lower class, despite being lower class, is better off than most people in the entire world. It's true. You have a house, you can buy a TV, and you have access to clean water. That's pretty damn good in human standards. Looking at the past few thousands of years of human civilization, damn, you got it made. And that's pretty cool. But there's no reason why we have to stop there and accept that the pretty cool, There's no reason why we can't be better. But of course, there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of speed bumps when it comes to being better. And a lot of the speed bumps come in terms of, well, society gives us a lot of benefits. But at the same time, it has a few costs to it. Nothing's free in this world, that's pretty much lesson number one. But one of the costs that seems to come of it is war, is justice, or at least the consequences of justice. I was thinking about it, and I'm starting to realize that prisons aren't so much a place for people who won't obey the law, so much as people who can't obey the law. Whether or not there is a compulsion in their morality that doesn't mesh with the law, or they physically cannot control their own actions. They have impulse controls. In fact, or impulse control problems. And in fact, I think that's some of the latest conclusions in the science, is that a lot of criminals are people who can't really control their impulses, who act on a whim and can't really think ahead that far. And in that case, yeah, not really too good. It's kind of, there's no bar. You know, when we want to say, okay, it's not fair to punish someone who's mentally retarded because they're not unaware of their own actions. But the guy who grows up in a really, really poor neighborhood, who has had, you know, his father and mother arrested by the police countless times, whether they deserved it or not, he's seen his parental figures been harmed by authority figures, representatives of authority, and now he has associated harm with the representative authority, and he's associated good things with the dealing drugs or running with gangs, because running with a gang means you get protected, and getting some protection is better than not having any. So is that really that guy's fault that he acts out? Is that really that... Should society be really so gung-ho about putting these people in jail when really, in some of the loosest sense, they never had a chance? And they really shouldn't have, you know, if you were in their shoes, you really would agree there was no point in obeying the law. There's so many different perspectives that we have to consider all of them, and in reality we can't accept all of them. We would never be able to do anything. So we can claim to be the wise, and we can claim to be, we know better than the governments or the states, but there's too much to consider. So we have to govern, in some sense, I believe, we have to govern in a very loose sense. We have to have the law making very few statements of morality, very few what's right and wrong. And some of the best ways to do this, despite what any person will argue that neutral is, there's no such thing as neutral or whatever, I think the best way to handle the situation is to have our legal system and our political system take as little stance in morality as possible. Have it so that we only address the basics, the bare minimums of maintaining society, and we leave all of the morality, all of the philosophy to the people who, regardless of what anyone else will say, will just do it anyway. Basically what I'm saying is, we should really consider getting rid of a lot of our positions on things. And this includes positions on incest, or what marriage is. And in some cases it includes things, you know, some people might agree that marijuana should be legalized. And some people would argue that legalizing all drugs would be going too far. Well, I would agree that legalizing all drugs is going too far. But saying that consuming a substance so that it alters you, and that may later have harmful effects, it's more dangerous to be hypocritical on that stance than it is to take a stance on that. There's no such thing as a middle ground, really. Not on those issues. You can't be halfway for abortion or not. There's no halfway. You're either for it or you're against it. Even if you believe it should never happen, you're either for it or against it. And that's how we think. So, whether or not this actually has anything to do with the points raised in either of these two videos, I have to conclude that the reasonable should stop spending so much time talking about how reasonable they are, and should start realizing that reason doesn't really leave us. It doesn't really project itself onto others. It sort of does, but it's an illusion. It's really just other people's reason working with them. So although you might make a YouTube video and change people's minds, it's really a matter of their minds were already able to be changed in the first place, and they were already willing to accept something. So, I guess, in some sense, we should be more libertarian. So much so that, I don't know. There's no word for what I mean. Libertarian is not the word I mean. But, in a way, more liberal but less liberal. More for the protection of people's rights, less for stating what those rights really are. Leave it vague. Pretty much say, this is a constitution, and our people have a lot of rights. What those ones are? Figure it out. It's not that hard. Maybe that wouldn't be such a bad constitution, but then again, maybe that society wouldn't be able to govern itself very effectively. Who the fuck knows? Although I will add, since when do governments listen to their own rules anyway? Like, come on, really? God, that's what really pisses me off. Not the fact that political systems are flawed, so much as it's just some people really just don't give a shit about what's going on. And as a nerd, I cannot stand for that.